to this episode of Class is in Session. I'm your host, Ashley Stevens, and this show, exclusively on Black Enterprise, highlights the latest happenings inside HBCU classrooms, public policy issues facing these historic institutions, the latest and greatest on the business side of HBCU sports, and HBCU alum who are making major moves, especially in the business and artistic world. And I'm excited to have a powerful brother here with us today. Keion Jackson is a three-time Emmy-nominated TV writer, author, and playwright. And he's also a proud HBCU alum and is currently co-executive producer and senior story editor on the new animated Netflix series, Dee and Friends in Oz. Welcome, Keion Jackson.
Thank you for having me. I really, really appreciate the invite. I was just telling some friends, like, I'm black, but I do not have an enterprise. I'm kind of surprised that I was invited, but I'm very grateful for the opportunity. I'm familiar with the magazine, and like, it's just a big cultural touchstone. So I'm really flattered and honored to be here.
Awesome. Well, listen, that you mentioned that you don't have an enterprise, I beg to differ because you are a three-time, uh, three-time brother. That's a big deal. Emmy-nominated TV writer, right? Like I think your enterprise is your gift in writing. Listen, you have an incredible resume. Tell us a little bit about some of the networks and studios that you've worked with, and also, of the places that you're at. How many people actually look like you?
Well, so I've worked for Sesame Workshop. I've written for Nickelodeon and like so many different companies, and like I've been very very fortunate in that. I will say though, I do wish that there were more black men working in kids TV. So hopefully, some people will see this and think, you know what, I would like to write cartoons or have an interest because we really really do need more representation behind the scenes as well. So one of the things that I think is important is that like when you are like a part of a community, you know how to serve it, right?
Mm.
So there's a knowledge and a nuance that comes along with being in community that you can bring to the projects that adds value on screen and makes them even more resonant for the families watching at home.
So tell us where you're from and at what age did your interest for writing spark?
So, one, thank you. You just said a lot of very nice things. I appreciate it. But I'm from Port Allen, Louisiana. Very, very proud Louisiana native. And I grew up always writing. Like I don't remember a time not being a writer. I have a twin sister who's an engineer now, and she would always like put things together and take things apart. And I would be in the other corner of the room, like drawing and writing poems and stuff. Right. So in my community, like my grandmother and community members really would reach out and say, hey, and they would encourage me. And I have a very early memory of being in second or third grade, and I wrote a poem about my mama called Mama. And my teacher gave the poem to like the town newspaper, the West Side Journal, I believe. And they published it. Like they put my little second grade poem in the paper. And from then I was just like, okay, not only am I good at this, but like the grown-ups seem to be supporting it, and that really made a huge difference in me identifying as a writer and a storyteller.
Wow. So from the second grade is when you were first published, and you continued to grow your interest and broaden your skill set in writing since then. That's pretty cool. That's really, really cool. Have you kept in touch with that teacher that published the poem?
Oh, I reach out. I'm always talking to teachers on Facebook. I'm actually going home to do a writing workshop next week in my old school. So yeah, I'm always in touch with teachers.
Love to hear that. The fact that you're pouring back into other students. We're going to come back to that. But let's get into your HBCU journey, right? So tell us where you attended college and why specifically you chose an HBCU.
So I guess I'll start at the why first. So growing up in Port Allen, Louisiana, I was very close to Southern University, and it was like maybe 10 or 15 minutes away. And I remember like so much joy and pride being around HBCU culture. And I remember going to the Bayou Classic and the bands and the step teams and all of this like beautiful Black culture that was associated with the college, but also that poured into the community, right? So I was like, okay, I got to be a part of this. So I was always going to go to an HBCU. It was just a question of which one.
So after graduating from Clark Atlanta University, what was your first job in the professional world as a writer?
I got an internship at Hallmark Cars in Kansas City, Missouri. So when I first started doing it, I was like, oh, this will be like a fun thing to do for a couple years. And I just fell in love with the job. It was interesting and like it was in service to people and helping people mend and celebrate relationships. And I really had a knack for it. So I was there for a while. And one of the things I loved about it was there were so many opportunities to do different things. And that's where the books came from. So Hallmark has been around for like over 100 years, right? And there's a huge database with like a bunch of poems and jokes and all the writing that's ever been written ever for any greeting card in like the over 100 years.
Wow.
But one of the editors was going through my writing in the system, and she said, "Oh, Keion, you seem to have an interesting perspective on faith. Would you like to write a book about faith?" And I was like, "Okay." So that's how Because Jesus came into existence.
So that's remarkable, Keon, that the notion that your work, while you were a greeting card writer, someone took notice and said, I think you should write a book. And so tell us a little bit about that book, Because Jesus, and what it's about.
Yeah, so an editor was going through the system, found a lot of my writing about faith, and said, "Hey, you have an interesting perspective. Would you like to write a book?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, of course." And this opportunity fell into my lap. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to write about faith in a way that's accessible, that meets people where they are, that's fun, that's funny, and that hopefully feels like a warm hug, right? Because, like, as we know, life is hard. Everybody's going through stuff. So, why not write this book that could be something that people can turn to when they need a little pick me up? And I felt like, well, I got to do it. So, that's where Because Jesus came from.
And you've done some children's books as well, right?
Yes, I think I've written 4 or 5 children's books. They were also published by Hallmark Cards. And the first one was called Super Me, which was a book about a kid who, whenever he wanted to conquer his fear, he would wear a superhero mask. And then the book came with like a little mask, and it was really, really helpful for a lot of kids who were dealing with like anxiety and fears around growing up for that age group. So like that was the start of me like getting into like writing kids books.
That's really cool. That's so cool. Did you know that when you were a little boy who wrote that poem that got published in the local newspaper, that one day you would be writing books for children?
To some degree, yes. I mean, it's not in an arrogant way, but like as a person of faith, right? So it doesn't. It's not useful to like believe a little bit. So like anything has to be possible, right? So
Right.
so even from a young age, I'm like, well, somebody got to write the books. Why couldn't it be me? Or somebody
Hmm.
has to write the TV shows. Why couldn't it be me? So I think that there is a very practical use for belief at an early age. And I thought, well, it is possible for me too.
Yeah, yeah, it's possible. I like that. That's good advice for young people too. It is possible. Keion Jackson, let's talk about your work as a TV writer and as a story editor. Tell us what those roles mean, and also what networks, what studios have you worked with?
Cool. So I have worked as a story editor on 3 animated children's series, and what a story editor does, and it varies depending on the show, but you help like edit the story. So you want to make sure that every script works. Do we have our beginning? Do we have a middle? Do we have an end? What is the lesson we want kids to get from the episode? Is it coming through? Are the voices consistent of all of our characters? Do we need to add some jokes? So it's very much a high level look at the story and is it working, not only in the context of the episode but in context of the entire season. And I've been very fortunate to work on some shows that like are very much designed to help kids and like be supportive for families. So
Mhm.
we're also looking at, okay, well, what is culture, what is life, how can we meet kids in this moment and give them some emotional or educational support that'll be beneficial to them in their future.
That's so cool. What are some of the shows you've worked on?
I worked on Karma's World on Netflix, which was created by Chris Ludacris Bridges, which,
Nice.
as you can imagine, like I still, it's still wild to me that I have worked with Ludacris. Like it's one of
Mhm.
those things that's just like that is a thing that happened. But yeah, Karma's World. If you have not seen it, it's still streaming on Netflix. It's about a little girl who's 10 years old and she wants to change the world with her music. She's a
Mm.
rapper. We have original music that, of course, is written by Ludacris. And it's a really fun show that is really, really interesting. And there hasn't really been anything like it on TV before.
And I have seen some of Karma's work. I love her curly fro, like her style. She's got a little brother. Like so I can relate to aspects of that, right? Like I think it's really cool the cultural representation on screen, right? That I think is really important. So you have a role, you have a hand in that cultural representation for animated series as a story
Oh,
editor.
absolutely, and thank you so much for saying that. We worked really, really hard. I mean, we had conversations about skin tone, we had conversations about voice talent, conversations about hair, her clothes. Like we really wanted to one celebrate hip hop culture, but also celebrate Black culture and make sure that the show was affirming. One of the things that we're seeing in research is that positive cultural affirmation helps Black kids' mental health. So we really wanted to be intentional about making sure that like we celebrated Black culture in the series.
Awesome. You definitely have done that. Now, the newest hit is on Netflix. It's called Dee and Friends in Oz, and I've checked it out. It's absolutely adorable. Now, is this a modern animated series take on The Wiz or The Wizard of Oz?
What so one, thank you for watching. Two, so the show is based on the original Oz books from way, way, way back when. And again, it's a loose adaptation. We took some big swings. It was very important to us to make a show that felt contemporary and relevant to kids right now. So you probably noticed the music. It's hip hop, it's R&B, it's gospel. It's very, very much contemporary, and the
Mhm.
lessons that are embedded in the show are like speaking to things that kids are going through right now.
That's so cool. That is so cool. That's so cool. How's it been received so far?
Very well. I want to give a shout out to like the Oz fandom. I'm not sure if you know this or not, but there are a lot of people who love all things Oz, and there's been so many different iterations of the show. Like we've had the Wiz, we've had all these different TV shows and musicals, and I've seen a lot of very kind things online about our show and like what we did with it. So I really appreciate that. Also, kids love it. It's a musical. So
Mhm.
like we have at least four songs in every episode, and music is
Mhm.
pushing the stories forward. So kids are really into it. The animation is fun. It's an adventure series. It's like high comedy. So even though we have a lesson in every single episode, it is an enjoyable, adventurous, fun watch.
I know it's a musical, and obviously it's giving lessons and stories and instruction, for children to learn. But there's some pretty powerful musicians and voices behind this music, right?
Absolutely. So we're very excited about our music. It is written and composed by Terriana Tankball of Tank and the Bangers, who is just beyond talented. Like I don't have the words. Also, just a really cool person to work with. She wrote whatever genre we needed. So in the beginning of the series, we said we want the show to sound like the music that's in a little black girl's heart, right? So we start if we start there, then that means we're really digging deep into like black musical traditions. So we're going gospel, we're going hip hop, we're having R&B, like we're country. Let's talk about it, right? So we're doing all those things. But then we say to Tank, okay, well, in this episode we want to do techno, and regardless of what we asked her to do, she wrote beautiful songs that were catchy, that were accessible to little kids, and like they're still stuck in my head. I mean, she just hit it out of the park.
Love to hear that. Love to hear that. So, listen, did you have any favorite animated series growing up that you watched?
Oh, I was all about cartoons. One of my favorites was Doug on Nickelodeon. You remember that? So I mean, the soundtrack was great. The music, the theme song, do 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 do.
Hmm.
So
Do.
it's just like
Doug and Patty Mayonnaise.
I Patty Mayonnaise, I loved it. And like looking back on it, I was a big Skeeter fan.
Hmm.
And I know he was blue, but he was black. I mean, I mean, let's be real. I mean, he he, like his shorts. He had a high top. He was a DJ sometimes. His name was Skeeter. So I'm like, that's a brother. And so I love the show. I love Doug. But I also like really connected to Skeeter because in my mind he was a black coded character. And who knows whether or not that's what the creators of the show like were going for. But for me, watching at home in Port Allen, Louisiana, it was very resonant.
What do you want people to see or to feel when they see your work, particularly the animated series or even your work as an author?
I would want people to feel encouraged and inspired. The reality is life is hard, not just for grown-ups, but for kids too. So if I can make something that like gives them some escapism, makes them feel joyful, happy, or even helps them confront whatever their reality is with hope and optimism, then I think I've done my job. But my hope is that whatever I do, it helps and does not hurt, right?
So what would your advice be to college students that are interested in pursuing a career in creative writing?
First, you gotta write. I'm not being facetious, but so many times I meet aspiring writers who haven't written anything yet. So you have to get it on the page. And once you do get it on the page, share your work. Find some people that you trust. Get notes, get feedback. I do think sometimes that artists can be a little bit protective and sensitive, which I understand, but the reality is you cannot grow unless you get feedback from people. So have a community of writers. Find some friends, family that you trust, and share your work with them. I would also say read. If you want to
Mhm.
be a screenwriter, there's screenplays all over the place. In fact, Deadline, which is like one of the trades, around award season, they always post screenplays from movies of that year. For instance, like the screenplay for the new Color Purple musical is available online.
Hmm.
So if you want to learn, if you're a student, read it, dissect it, see how the story is built, see how the characters are constructed, and you can learn from it. I would also say find an audience in your community. So if you happen to be a kid, like whether it's the community center, your place of worship, put on a show, right? So before I was writing for Sesame Street, I was writing puppet shows for Vacation Bible School. So
Mhm.
don't forget that you have an audience all around you, and that's how you learn. That's how you grow. I would also say, don't be afraid to apply. I think a lot of people think, oh, a million people are going to apply for this fellowship or for this festival or for that thing. Probably not. So numerically, your chances are probably better than you think they are. Also, if it's for you, it's for you. So apply to festivals, apply to fellowships, and those things can be a big break.
This is really good advice, Keon. And earlier you talked about going back to your hometown to speak to high school students. So, to you, what is the importance of pouring back into young people? And do you do that also as an alum of Clark Atlanta University?
One of the reasons that I think it's important for us to give back and like be visible in our community is because kids need to know what's possible, right? So I'm going back. I'm going to do some writing workshops, but maybe some kids in attendance don't want to be a writer. They just need to know that like prayers do get answered, dreams do come true. So whatever their I want, whatever their journey is, it can be affirmed from them just seeing like that it happened for me. So a lot of it is about being visible and letting kids know what is possible.
Love that. Love that. And how has your HBCU network been beneficial, particularly as an alum of the Clark Atlanta University? How has your network been beneficial in your career and advancing your career?
As an alum of Clark Atlanta, one of the biggest ways that they've supported me is like emotional support, right? So having a network of people who like went through what you went through at the university and now are like out in the real world experiencing things that happen in the workplace, but having people to turn to, ask advice, and just get that emotional support and encouragement, which is huge. And there's also like more tactile, practical ways. Which in oh, have you heard about this fellowship? Have you heard about this job opportunity? So it's very much a professional network, but I think there's even more value, perhaps, in like the emotional support that comes from the community. I'm living my dream, and I'm very, very grateful for it. As far as what's next, I'm open. I created some shows that are in development. Hopefully, I get a green light soon. Always praying for the green light. And I also want to get into like coming of age movies.
Hmm.
So we don't have a lot of black teen movies, and if you think about it, we don't have many without guns in them, right? So like it's even fewer if you think about okay, well, what is a black teen like coming of age movie? And I think our kids also need support at that age. So I would like to create some things that can be fun, but also help them like through getting like through that stage of life. So I'm really interested
Hmm.
in writing some coming of age movies.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, Keon, thank you so much for sharing this. We're excited to hear all that you've done and all that you're going to continue to do. We'll keep our eyes and our ears tuned into all that you have in store. So, thank you, Keion Jackson, for being here on this episode of Classes in Session.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. You've been great. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Glad to share your journey as an alum of Clark Atlanta University. And for all of you watching, be sure to share this episode with friends and students in particular. But make sure you take some of these tips to heart and to mind, especially if you're interested in a career in creative writing. And also stay posted for the latest and greatest on Black Enterprise's social media channels and on our website at blackenterprise.com. I'm your host of Classes in Session, Ashley Stevens. And for this episode, class